Chapter 1. The Anniversary Setup. The hotel ballroom smelled faintly of polished wood and champagne, the air alive with the soft clinking of glasses as servers moved briskly, setting the final touches for the evening. A string quartet rehearsed at the corner of the stage, tuning their instruments with practiced precision. Daniel Mercer stood at the center of it all, adjusting the cuffs of his navy blue suit and forcing his restless hands to stay still. "Mr. Mercer," the restaurant manager whispered, leaning in discreetly, "your guests will begin arriving within the hour. Everything is as requested. The cake will be brought out on cue." Daniel nodded, offering the kind of polite smile that masked the storm inside him. 21 years, he thought. 21 years, Clara. Tonight's for us. He wasn't the kind of man who splurged often. His life had been built on routine. Long workdays at the firm, dinners hurriedly eaten at home, falling asleep in front of the news. But for Clara, he had decided to make this night unforgettable. He'd booked the entire upstairs dining hall of Marcellino's, one of the most exclusive Italian restaurants in the city. Friends, family, old neighbors, even Steve, his best friend since college, were on the guest list. It was expensive, yes, maybe a little reckless. But Daniel told himself it was worth it. You only celebrated a 21st anniversary once. He checked his watch again. Clara was still upstairs in their suite, getting ready. He had given her the presidential suite as a surprise gift earlier that afternoon, complete with roses and champagne. She had smiled, hugged him, whispered, "You didn't have to, Danny," in that familiar soft tone. But then her phone had buzzed, and she excused herself quickly, saying she needed to make a call. That had been 20 minutes ago. Daniel let out a slow breath, pushing the unease from his mind. Clara was probably calling her sister, maybe arranging some last-minute touch for the evening. She liked details, little surprises. Maybe she was planning one for him. He wanted to believe that. He walked back upstairs to their suite. The sound of running water filled the bathroom. The door was cracked, a strip of golden light spilling across the carpet. Daniel knocked lightly. "Clara? You almost ready? Guests will be here soon." Her voice came, muffled but sharp, from behind the door. "I'll be out in a minute, Daniel. Just fixing my hair." There was the faint, unmistakable click of a phone being set on the counter. Daniel hesitated, then forced a chuckle. "All right, but don't take too long. You know how your mother gets when she's waiting." Silence followed. He pictured her rolling her eyes, lips curled into that playful smirk she used when she thought he was being uptight. He walked back to the sitting area, staring out the tall window. Below, the city buzzed, taxis honking in frustration, headlights streaking like fireflies. He thought back to the first anniversary he'd celebrated with Clara, cheap wine, a broken-down car, and a candlelit dinner at their tiny apartment. He had worked 2 jobs back then, just to cover rent and her college tuition. She had been radiant that night, telling him she didn't need luxury, only him. Somewhere along the way, luxury had become part of the equation. Daniel didn't mind. He wanted to give her the world. But he sometimes wondered if he had lost something in the process. The bathroom door opened, interrupting his thoughts. Clara stepped out, wearing a deep emerald dress that clung to her in just the right places, her chestnut hair cascading down her shoulders in perfect curls. She looked stunning, breathtaking even. "Well?" she asked, raising a brow, lips painted in a shade of red that made his throat dry. Daniel let out a low whistle. "You look like the reason they invented anniversaries." Clara smirked, adjusting her necklace. "You always were dramatic." She leaned in, kissed his cheek lightly, then pulled away before he could hold her longer. "You ready?" he asked. Her eyes flicked down to her phone, resting in her palm. She locked the screen quickly. "Yes, of course." Daniel forced a smile. He pushed down the twinge in his gut, telling himself not to be ridiculous. Tonight wasn't the night to question her mood. When they entered the ballroom, the guests erupted in warm applause. Clara's mother hurried forward, wrapping her daughter in a hug, while Daniel received hearty backslaps from old friends. Steve arrived shortly after, with his usual swagger, tossing an arm around Daniel's shoulder. 21 years, Steve said, grinning. "Jesus, Danny, you're making the rest of us look bad. My longest relationship was with a bottle of bourbon." Daniel laughed, clinking glasses with him. "Don't be jealous. Some of us got lucky." He turned to look at Clara, who was already surrounded by a cluster of women, her laughter ringing bright. The night unfolded with wine, laughter, and toasts. Daniel played the gracious host, shaking hands, sharing memories, retelling old stories of how he and Clara had met at a campus bookstore. Yet, despite the celebration, he found himself watching her more than he wanted to admit. She smiled, yes. She laughed. She played the perfect wife. But something in her eyes seemed distant, distracted, as if her mind was elsewhere. More than once, he noticed her slipping her phone from her purse under the table, thumbs moving quickly before she tucked it away again. During dinner, he reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "You all right?" he asked softly. Clara blinked, almost startled. Then she smiled, a little too brightly. "Of course. Just soaking all in." She raised her glass. "You did an amazing job, Daniel." Really, her words were right. Her tone was right, but her hand felt limp under his. As dessert arrived, a layered tiramisu with Happy 21st written in chocolate, Daniel stood, tapping his glass. "I just want to say something," he began. His voice wavered for a moment, but he steadied it. 21 years ago, I married the most beautiful, stubborn, brilliant woman I'd ever met. She's been my anchor, my compass, my reason to push through every hard day. And if I had to do it all again, I'd do it in a heartbeat." The room applauded. Clara smiled politely, lifting her glass again, but her eyes didn't quite meet his. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat, forcing his own smile wider. He told himself it didn't matter, that maybe she was just overwhelmed, maybe it was just nerves. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, not a night for doubts. As the applause faded, he leaned close, whispering, "Happy anniversary, Clara." She kissed his cheek, whispered back, "Happy anniversary, Daniel." Her phone buzzed again in her clutch. And for just a moment, as the music swelled and glasses clinked all around them, Daniel wondered if he was the only one in the room who believed everything was perfect. Chapter 2. Small Red Flags. The party was in full swing now, the kind of noisy, sparkling energy that carried across the polished hardwood floors and bounced off the vaulted ceilings. Waiters drifted between clusters of people, balancing trays of wine glasses. A steady hum of conversation filled the air, punctuated by bursts of laughter. Daniel stood by the edge of the dining area, his tie loosened just enough to make him look relaxed. He lifted his glass of Chianti, scanning the tables with a host's pride. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Guests were chatting animatedly. The quartet was playing just the right mix of classics, and the food had drawn several murmurs of approval. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but his gaze kept drifting back to one corner of the room where Clara sat with Steve. Steve was leaning in close, gesturing with his hands the way he always did when he told one of his exaggerated stories. Clara's laugh rose above the din, light and melodic, the same laugh Daniel had fallen for decades ago. Yet somehow, it landed differently tonight. Too loud, too eager. Daniel sipped his wine, watching them. Clara touched Steve's forearm briefly as she laughed again, leaning forward, her eyes sparkling. Steve grinned, smug and comfortable, like he belonged right there beside her. A knot tightened in Daniel's stomach. "Stop it," he told himself. "You're imagining things." Clara laughs with everyone. And Steve's always been like this. That's just him. Still, his hand gripped the stem of his glass a little tighter. He tried to rejoin a conversation happening at his table, nodding at a story one of Clara's cousins was telling about their latest vacation. But the words slid past him. His ears tuned back toward the sound of Clara's laugh. "Danny, you listening?" Steve suddenly called out, turning in his chair to face him. Daniel forced a smile. "Always, buddy. What's the joke?" Steve smirked, raising his glass. "Just telling Clara about that time freshman year when you tried to impress Lisa Patterson by jumping into the campus fountain. Remember? Middle of October, freezing cold." Clara's laughter bubbled again, rich and unrestrained. She dabbed at the corner of her eye. "Oh, God. Danny, you really did that?" Daniel's face warmed. He shrugged, chuckling lightly. "Yeah, thought it was smooth at the time." Lisa didn't exactly agree. Steve grinned. "Smooth wasn't your strong suit, my friend." Something in the way he said it carried an edge, playful, yes, but almost too sharp, too knowing. Clara swatted at Steve's arm with mock reproach, but she was still smiling at him, not Daniel. Daniel felt it then, that flicker of something unpleasant. He tamped it down immediately. Come on, don't be paranoid. They've known each other almost as long as you've known Steve. They're friends. That's all this is. He lifted his glass again, masking his unease with another sip. Later, during the main course, Steve pulled his chair closer to Clara's. They were shoulder to shoulder, leaning in, whispering something that sent Clara into another fit of quiet giggles. Daniel tried to focus on his meal, cutting into the roasted lamb, nodding politely at his brother-in-law's commentary about the wine list. But every time his knife scraped against the plate, the sound seemed to echo too loudly, his irritation bleeding into the gesture. He glanced up again. Clara tilted her head, her hair brushing Steve's arm. She said something, lips curved in a half-smile. Steve threw his head back, laughing in that booming way that demanded attention. A few people at nearby tables turned their heads. Daniel's chest tightened. "Everything all right, Daniel?" his sister asked softly from across the table. He blinked, forcing his features into something neutral. "Of course. Just long day at the office before this. I'm fine." She studied him for a moment, clearly unconvinced, but didn't press. When the waiters cleared the plates and began pouring more wine, Daniel excused himself from the table. He needed air. He stepped onto the balcony, the cool night breeze hitting his face. The city stretched before him, lights twinkling against the dark sky. He gripped the railing, breathing deeply. "You're overthinking this. Clara loves you. Steve's your best friend. Don't ruin tonight with stupid suspicions." Yet, beneath the reassurance, his gut gnawed at him. It wasn't just the laughter. It was the looks, the quick glances, the subtle shifts in posture. A kind of electricity between them he couldn't explain away. He rubbed his temples. "Maybe it's me. Maybe I've been so consumed with work that I'm seeing shadows where there aren't any. She deserves fun. She deserves attention. And Steve's just Steve." A voice behind him broke his thoughts. "There you are." Clara stepped onto the balcony, the hem of her emerald dress brushing the doorway. She held her glass delicately, the city lights glinting off the rim. Daniel turned, smiling faintly. "Needed some fresh air. You enjoying yourself?" She tilted her head, studying him. "Of course. Why wouldn't I? You seem," he hesitated, "distracted, maybe. Everything all right?" Clara's lips curved into a small smile. "I'm fine, Danny. Just having fun. Don't overthink it." She stepped closer, brushing a hand along his arm. "You did a wonderful job tonight. Really, I'm proud of you." The words soothed him, if only slightly. He kissed her temple, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. "I just want it to be perfect for you." Clara squeezed his hand lightly, then pulled away. "It is. Now come back inside. Everyone's asking where you went." As she turned, Daniel caught the faint glow of her phone in her other hand. A message lit up the screen before she quickly locked it and slipped it back in her clutch. His chest gave another tight squeeze. Back inside, Steve was waiting near their table, laughing with a few of Daniel's coworkers. When Clara joined him, Steve bent close to say something in her ear. She smiled, her eyes flicking briefly toward Daniel before returning to Steve. Daniel sat down slowly, his pulse a little faster than before. "It's nothing," he told himself again. "You're being paranoid." Steve's always been playful, and Clara's always been social. But the unease stayed, coiled in his gut, refusing to leave. Chapter 3, The Whisper and the Cheek Kiss. The night had reached its warm, buzzing peak. Glasses clinked, laughter rippled across the ballroom, and the quartet shifted into a livelier tempo. Daniel stood near the dessert table, greeting an old neighbor with the kind of polite smile that now felt mechanical. His mind wasn't on the conversation. It hadn't been for most of the evening. No matter how much he tried, his gaze kept drifting across the room, drawn to two figures by the bar. Clara and Steve. They stood a little apart from the rest, angled toward each other as if sharing some secret the world had no business hearing. Clara's hand brushed the stem of her martini glass. Her body turned fully toward him. Steve leaned in, that smug grin plastered across his face. Their heads were close enough that Daniel wondered if they could feel each other's breath. The neighbor's voice faded into static. Daniel excused himself abruptly, muttering something about checking on the staff, and began to weave his way through the crowd. His pulse quickened with every step. "Don't be ridiculous," he told himself. "They're probably talking about the food or the music or God knows what. Steve's always been a joker. Clara laughs at everything." But his legs didn't stop moving. His chest felt tight, each inhale shallow. He slowed as he neared the bar, not wanting to appear like he was eavesdropping. He positioned himself behind a group of chatting co-workers, half hidden, his ears straining toward the sound of their voices. "You believe he still thinks they're his kids?" Clara's voice floated to him, low, threaded with laughter. The words sliced into Daniel's chest like a blade. His stomach dropped, a cold wave rushing over him. Clara tilted her head, smiling at Steve. Then, as casually as if she were leaning in to brush a stray eyelash away, she pressed her lips against his cheek. A soft kiss. Quick, intimate. Daniel froze, the blood roaring in his ears. Steve chuckled, smirking as he swirled the whiskey in his glass. "And with all the money he's put into private schools and trips, we couldn't have done it better ourselves." The laughter that followed was quiet, private, meant for only them. Daniel's throat constricted. His grip tightened around his glass so fiercely he was afraid it might shatter. No, this isn't happening. I didn't just hear that. I didn't just see that. But the truth was there, undeniable, unfolding in front of his eyes. Before he could move, before he could even breathe, another voice joined them. Emma, their oldest daughter. She sauntered over, her heels clicking against the polished floor, a mischievous grin playing on her lips. She slipped between them with the ease of someone who had done it 100 times before, looping an arm through Steve's. "Yeah," she chimed in, rolling her eyes. "Uncle Steve is way more fun than our loser dad, anyway." Her words struck harder than any physical blow could have. Daniel's world fractured in that moment. The room spun around him. The sound of music and chatter dulled to a hollow echo. The sight of Clara's laugh, Steve's smirk, Emma's smirk, all of it seared into his mind like a brand. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He just stood there, staring at the people he thought he knew, realizing in an instant that everything he had built, everything he had given, had been a lie. And nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 4. The Public Meltdown. The glass in Daniel's hand trembled. His knuckles whitened as he gripped it, staring across the ballroom at the three faces that had just shattered his world. Clara, her lips curved in that smug little smile. Steve, whiskey glass raised like he'd won something. And Emma, his daughter, rolling her eyes as though mocking him was the most natural thing in the world. The laughter between them rang in Daniel's ears, drowning out the music, the conversations, the polite clinking of silverware. His chest burned. His throat tightened. He couldn't stand still any longer. Slowly, deliberately, Daniel walked toward them. Each step felt like it shook the floor. People noticed, heads turned, conversations faltered. The quartet trailed off mid-song, the strings echoing awkwardly into silence. By the time Daniel reached the bar, the entire room had gone quiet. Clara noticed first. Her smile faltered just slightly, but then she straightened, her expression morphing into something casual, dismissive. "Danny," she said lightly, swirling her drink. "Why are you glaring at us like that?" Daniel's voice came out low, hoarse, and trembling with rage. Don't you dare play innocent." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Steve smirked, setting his glass down with a little clink. "Hey, buddy, relax. You're making a scene." Daniel's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. A scene. His voice rose, cracking through the silence like thunder. "I just overheard my wife kissing my so-called best friend and telling him I've been raising his children. And you think I'm making a scene?" Gasps rippled through the room. Several guests exchanged stunned glances. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Clara laughed, a short, brittle sound. She waved her hand dismissively. "Daniel, for God's sake, you must have misheard. You've had too much wine, that's all. Sit down before you embarrass yourself further." Misheard, Daniel barked. His face flushed, sweat prickling his forehead. He pointed at her, his hand shaking. You kissed him. Right here. Tonight. And you. He turned to Steve, eyes blazing. You didn't even deny it. You sat there and bragged about it. Steve leaned back against the bar, unbothered. He gave a half shrug, lips curled into a smug grin. What can I say, Dan? Some things just work out better for everyone. Daniel lunged forward, but two guests quickly stepped between them, hands on his shoulders, murmuring, Easy, Daniel. Easy. Clara's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. Enough. She glared at him, her mask slipping, her tone dripping with condescension. You're overreacting like a child. Do you really want to ruin our anniversary party over some joke? Over nothing. Emma, still hanging off Steve's arm, rolled her eyes dramatically. God, Dad, you're so pathetic sometimes. Uncle Steve was just joking. You always think everything's about you. Daniel turned to her, his heart splitting. Emma, his voice cracked. You think this is funny? To call me a loser? To mock me in front of everyone? After everything I've done for you? Emma crossed her arms, scowling. All you ever do is work. You're never around. Steve actually pays attention to us. Her words cut deeper than any knife. The silence in the ballroom was suffocating now. Every guest stood frozen, watching the Mercer family implode before their eyes. Daniel's hands trembled. His whole body shook with rage and grief, but his voice grew colder, steadier, like steel hardening under fire. He straightened his shoulders, his expression shifting from wounded to resolute. Party's over, he announced, his voice carrying across the room. Everyone out. Go home. There's nothing to celebrate here. Murmurs swept through the guests. A few hesitated, but the authority in his tone left no room for argument. Chairs scraped back, glasses were set down hastily, and the crowd began to shuffle toward the exits, whispering in disbelief. Clara's face twisted in anger. Daniel, stop this nonsense right now. You're humiliating me. Daniel turned, his eyes burning into hers. No, Clara, you humiliated yourself. He let the words hang, sharp and final. Steve chuckled, shaking his head. Lawyer? You can't be serious, Danny boy. You're not really going to throw away 21 years over some misunderstanding, are you? Daniel's jaw flexed. He stepped forward, his voice like ice. My lawyer will be in touch. Both of you can look forward to explaining yourselves in court. Clara's drink trembled in her hand. For a moment, her mask cracked, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes darting between Daniel and Steve. But then she lifted her chin, regaining her composure. Her voice came out sharp, venomous, laced with arrogance. You'll never survive without me, Danny. You need me more than I'll ever need you. Chapter 5, The Silent Execution. The city was quiet by the time Daniel left the hotel. Midnight, maybe later. He wasn't sure. The neon glow of the streetlights blurred in his vision as he walked to his car, his body moving on instinct while his mind buzzed with static. The betrayal replayed on a loop. Clara's kiss on Steve's cheek. Steve's smirk. Emma's cruel little jab. 21 years of sacrifice undone in seconds. Daniel gripped the steering wheel until his fingers ached. His heart wanted to scream, to cry, to drive until the road swallowed him whole. But another part of him, colder, sharper, took control. No more. No more humiliation. If they want to tear this family apart, then they'll do it without my money, without my name, without the life I built for them. He pulled into the darkened parking lot of his office building. His security badge still worked after hours. The fluorescent lights flickered on as he stepped inside, the sterile emptiness wrapping around him. He went straight to his desk, unlocked his computer, and began to type. The first call was to his lawyer. Daniel. The man's groggy voice came through the receiver after a few rings. Do you have any idea what time it is? I don't care what time it is, Daniel said, his voice steady, eerily calm. I need you to start drafting divorce papers. Tonight. Non-negotiable. There was a pause. Divorce? Daniel, what she's been cheating, he cut in. His jaw tightened, the words bitter in his mouth. With Steve, my best friend. And apparently I've been raising his kids all these years. A sharp inhale crackled over the line. Jesus, Daniel, I'm sorry. I save it. I don't want sympathy. I want action. I want every cent protected, every asset moved, every joint account emptied before she even knows what hit her. The lawyer's tone shifted, professional now, alert. All right, I'll prepare the paperwork. We'll need to freeze assets, pull trust funds, do it. Everything. I don't care what it takes. For the next 2 hours, Daniel moved like a man possessed. He logged into accounts, transferred balances, redirected payments. His children's inheritance funds, gone, pulled into accounts only he could access. The joint savings and checking accounts, emptied, every last dollar wired into a secure trust under his name. He called the bank manager directly, his voice clipped and authoritative. This is Daniel Mercer. Effective immediately. Remove Clara Mercer's access to all accounts. Cancel her cards. If she attempts any withdrawal, flag it and contact me at once. The manager stammered. Mr. Mercer, that's highly unusual. We normally require. I said do it, Daniel snapped. You know who I am. You know what I've deposited into your bank over the years. Don't make me take my business elsewhere. Yes, sir. Understood. Click. Done. Every keystroke, every phone call was another brick in the wall he was building between himself and them. The silence of the office was broken only by the tapping of his keyboard and the occasional deep breath he forced into his lungs. But beneath the efficiency, the rage still burned. They laughed at me. In my face. In front of everyone. He remembered Emma's words, loser dad. His throat tightened, but he pushed the emotion down, burying it under layers of steel. You want Steve to be the fun one? Fine. Let him try paying for your private school, your vacations, your clothes, your future. Let's see how fun he is when the bills come due. His reflection in the office window caught his eye. The man staring back looked older, harder. His eyes were hollow, his jaw clenched tight. He barely recognized himself. Good, he thought bitterly. The old me was a fool. This one won't be. By dawn, the groundwork was done. The divorce papers were in motion. The accounts were sealed. The cards were canceled. Clara would wake up to find her world dismantled, her safety net gone. Daniel drove home, the first light of morning staining the horizon. His chest ached with exhaustion, but he felt no relief. Only grim satisfaction. When he walked into the house, Clara was waiting in the kitchen. She was still in last night's dress, her makeup smudged, her hair a tangle. Her arms were crossed, her eyes red from crying, or maybe from rage. You storm out of our anniversary party and disappear all night, she snapped. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you looked? Everyone's going to be talking about this for weeks. Daniel said nothing. He walked past her, grabbed a glass of water, and drank. Clara slammed her hand on the counter. Don't you ignore me. You think you can humiliate me like that? You think you can just... Her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it, her eyes scanning the screen. Then her face drained of color. What is this? She tapped furiously, scrolling. My cards declined? Daniel, what the hell is going on? Daniel set the glass down slowly. He turned, his eyes cold. Welcome to your new reality, Clara. No more dinners on my dime. No more clothes, no more trips, no more pretending. You wanted Steve? You got him. Let him pay for you now. Her mouth fell open, stunned. You can't just cut me off. Those accounts are mine too. They were, Daniel said flatly. Not anymore. At that moment, the front door swung open. Steve stumbled in, still in last night's suit jacket, his tie askew. Clara, what the hell? My car just got declined at the gas station. They said the account's frozen. Clara turned to him, panicked. He did it. He's cutting us off. Steve's smirk was gone now. His face flushed, his eyes wide. Daniel, you son of a... But Daniel didn't flinch. He simply stared at them both, his expression carved from stone. Inside, the pain still clawed at him, raw and bleeding. But above it all sat the cold, ruthless truth. They would never see another cent of his money again. Chapter 6, Vanishing Point. The morning sun crept over the horizon, spilling gold into the quiet suburban street. For the first time in 21 years, Daniel looked at his home not as a sanctuary, but as a prison. The walls that once echoed with laughter now felt suffocating, corrupted by lies he couldn't unhear. He stood in the doorway of his study, a leather duffel bag open on the desk. Documents were neatly stacked beside it. passports, birth certificates, deeds, bonds. Years of meticulous record-keeping now served one purpose: to ensure he could vanish without leaving a footprint behind. Every item he placed inside the bag felt like closing a chapter. His father's watch, the one Clara insisted he never wore because it looked too old-fashioned. A framed photo of his parents on their wedding day. Several flash drives loaded with financial data and encrypted backups. He opened the safe hidden behind a bookshelf and withdrew stacks of cash, thick envelopes he had quietly accumulated over the years. Clara never noticed. She never asked about the quiet weekends he spent working late. She never realized her husband had been quietly preparing for storms she couldn't imagine. Now, the storm was here. Downstairs, the house stirred. Footsteps padded across hardwood, voices muffled but tense. Daniel heard Clara's snapping orders, her voice shrill and panicked. "I don't care, Steve. Try your card again." He must have made a mistake. Maybe the bank flagged it. Call them. Steve's voice followed, cocky but edged with irritation. "Relax, babe. He can't just pull the plug like that. We'll fix it. He's bluffing." Danny Boy's always been dramatic. Daniel paused on the stairs, listening. Clara's voice cracked, raw with frustration. "Dramatic? He embarrassed us in front of everyone last night. He stormed out, and now everything's frozen. The mortgage, the kids' tuition. Steve, my card was declined buying coffee this morning." Coffee. Their panic should have brought Daniel satisfaction, but instead it only deepened the hollow ache inside him. "They don't miss me. They miss what I gave them." He moved silently, like a shadow, into the bedroom. Clara's vanity was cluttered with jewelry and trinkets, most of them purchased with his long hours at the firm. He picked through carefully, choosing only what could be pawned or traded without drawing attention. The diamond bracelet from their 15th anniversary, a gold chain he once caught Steve admiring, earrings he had bought after a big promotion. He tucked them into the duffel. No guilt, no hesitation. She had already stolen far more from him: years, dignity, trust. By mid-morning, the bag was packed, the house strangely still. Daniel walked from room to room one last time, absorbing details he knew he would never see again. The crooked family portrait in the hallway. The faint scratches on the dining table from when the kids did homework. The sofa where Clara and Steve must have sat, laughing at his expense. His chest tightened, but he forced himself forward. Sentiment is a weakness they counted on. Not anymore. The phone in his pocket vibrated. Clara's name lit up the screen. He hesitated, then answered. "Where the hell are you?" Clara's voice exploded through the line. She was frantic, almost unhinged. "You think you can humiliate me and then just disappear? You coward." Daniel said nothing. He let her words hang, the venom dripping through the silence. "You can't just vanish, Danny," she spat. "You think you're in control, but you're nothing without us. Without me. You'll come crawling back. You always do." Daniel's grip on the phone tightened, but he stayed silent. Then another voice joined in, smug and mocking. "Steve, run all you want, Danny boy," he drawled. "She's mine now. Always has been. You were just too blind to see it." Daniel's jaw clenched. He could picture Steve, smirking into the phone, arm draped around Clara like he'd already won. The urge to scream, to unleash every ounce of fury boiling inside him, was overwhelming. But he didn't. Instead, he took a long breath, and in the calmest voice he could muster, he said, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Then he hung up. He powered the phone down, removed the SIM card, and dropped it into the kitchen sink's garbage disposal. A flick of the switch, a grinding roar, and it was gone like everything else he was leaving behind. By noon, Daniel was driving. The duffel sat in the passenger seat, heavy with the remnants of his life. He didn't have a destination, not yet. Maybe a cabin upstate, maybe a rented apartment under a different name. Wherever it was, it would be far from here, far from the people who had laughed at him while draining him dry. As the highway opened up ahead, a strange calm settled over him. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but underneath it burned something stronger. Resolve. Never again. Never again will I be humiliated. Never again will I let someone take from me without consequence. The skyline shrank in his rearview mirror, the world he built fading into the distance. For the first time in 2 decades, Daniel felt something he hadn't known he was missing. Freedom. And with it came a vow, silent but unshakable. He would never be humiliated again. Chapter 7. 5 years later. The morning sun hit the glass towers of downtown Dallas, painting them in fire and gold. Daniel adjusted his cufflinks in the reflection of his office window, taking in the skyline with quiet pride. 5 years ago, he had left everything behind with nothing but a duffel bag and the weight of betrayal on his shoulders. Now he stood at the top of a financial consulting firm he built from scratch under a new name. David Cross. The name felt real now. He had grown into it, shed his old skin. The man who once begged for scraps of affection from his wife and children was gone. In his place stood someone leaner, sharper, stronger. His suits fit better. His body was toned, the result of early mornings at the gym instead of late nights drinking away exhaustion. His eyes, once dulled by years of being dismissed, carried a steeliness that came from surviving hell and walking out the other side. Flashback. The first years. But it hadn't been easy. The first year nearly broke him. Nights in a dingy motel room, the whine of neon lights bleeding through the blinds, his mind replaying Clara's laughter with Steve, Emma's cruel words. Uncle Steve is way more fun than our loser dad. He'd stare at the ceiling until morning, every betrayal gnawing at him. Loneliness was its own kind of torture. He thought of calling, of reaching out just to hear their voices again, but he stopped himself. Pride held the line where love had failed. So he poured everything into survival. He invested the assets he'd salvaged, quietly growing his money. He studied new markets, forged new contacts, forced himself to network when all he wanted was isolation. The rage, the heartbreak, it all became fuel. By the 3rd year, he was thriving. He bought a condo with a view of the city skyline. By the 4th, his firm had 20 employees and clients that stretched across state lines. By the 5th, he was wealthier than he'd ever been. But it wasn't just about money. It was about power, the kind no one could ever take from him again. Daniel now. Mr. Cross, your 10 o'clock is here. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Daniel smiled faintly. Even his employees saw him as a man in control, not someone to pity. Send them in, he replied, his voice calm, measured, confident. As the meeting began, his thoughts drifted, not to numbers but to ghosts. He rarely let himself think of them anymore. Clara, Steve, Emma, the family he had once believed in. Were they happy? Did they laugh as they used to, with him shut out of the picture? He doubted it, and part of him hoped they weren't. Meanwhile, Clara and Steve, 2 states away, in the crumbling shell of the house Daniel had abandoned, Clara slammed a cupboard door shut. Damn it, Steve, we're out of coffee again, she snapped, her voice hoarse from years of cigarettes and cheap wine. From the living room, Steve grunted, eyes glued to a muted sports broadcast. His gut hung over the waistband of his sweatpants, a far cry from the cocky charm he once flaunted. Then go buy some, he muttered without looking at her. With what money? She shot back. You think the world runs on IOUs? Steve turned, his face sour. Don't start, Clara. I told you my hours got cut. You're welcome to get off your ass and find a job yourself. Clara's laugh was bitter. Oh, right. I gave 20 years of my life to being a wife and mother, and now I'm supposed to flip burgers while you sulk on the couch? That's rich. The house itself echoed their ruin. The once pristine kitchen tiles were cracked, the paint peeled in corners. The grass outside was overgrown, the fence falling apart. What had been a symbol of success during Daniel's years of sacrifice had become a monument to decay. Emma and the kids. Upstairs, Emma scrolled through her phone, ignoring the muffled shouting downstairs. At 22, she was bitter, disillusioned, and tired. She had dropped out of college after 1 year, unable to keep up once the tuition check stopped. She resented her mother most of all. You ruined everything, she spat one night during an argument. Dad paid for everything, and you let it all burn because you couldn't keep your legs closed. Clara had slapped her, but the sting was nothing compared to the words that followed. At least he loved us, Emma said coldly. You don't even know how. The younger kids had drifted further still. One lived with friends, another barely spoke to anyone at home. The family had splintered, each fracture leading back to the night Daniel walked out. Flashback. Clara's calls. Daniel remembered those early months after his disappearance, when Clara would call his old number endlessly. "Danny, come back. We can fix this." Her messages had begged at first. Then they turned to rage. "You coward. You think you can run forever?" And eventually, to despair. "Please, the kids need you. We need you. Just don't do this." But he never answered. He let her words vanish into the void. Back to Daniel. Now, 5 years later, he sipped his black coffee in his sleek office, gazing at the city below. He wasn't naive. He knew he carried scars. Trust was hard. Companionship felt distant, like a foreign land he wasn't ready to visit again. But he wasn't broken anymore. His phone buzzed, a message from a colleague about an investment dinner that night. He typed back quickly, then leaned back in his chair. 5 years ago, he had been a ghost, wandering with no purpose but pain. Now he was alive, and somewhere out there, the people who mocked him were choking on their own ruin. Daniel allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Chapter 8. The Reunion. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries, the low hum of conversations blending with the hiss of steaming milk. It was Daniel's Saturday ritual now, a quiet morning stop at a local coffee shop where nobody knew his past, nobody whispered about betrayal, nobody called him loser dad. Here, he was simply David Cross, respected businessman, anonymous among strangers. He stood in line, scrolling absently through emails on his phone when a voice behind him said softly, almost disbelieving, "Dad." The word cut sharper than any blade. His head snapped up. The phone nearly slipped from his hand. For a heartbeat, he thought he'd imagined it, a ghost conjured by memory. But when he turned, his breath caught in his throat. Emma, older now, no longer the smug teenager rolling her eyes at him across dinner tables. At 23, she looked worn, fragile. Her eyes were ringed with sleeplessness, her clothes a little rumpled, her expression hesitant. Yet there was no mistaking her. The same auburn hair as Clara, the same sharp cheekbones, though now softened with regret. Emma. The name left his mouth like an exhale he'd been holding for years. She froze, tears springing instantly to her eyes. "It is you," she whispered, hand trembling as she clutched her coffee cup. "I thought I was crazy. I've been looking for you for years." Daniel's chest tightened. He hadn't prepared for this, for her. His instincts screamed to walk out, to protect the life he'd built. But his feet refused to move. A collision of worlds. They found a corner table, both silent at first. Daniel studied her cautiously, his hands clasped to keep from shaking. She stared at him as though afraid he'd vanish if she blinked. "I didn't know where to start," Emma finally said, her voice cracking. "Mom always told us you were gone, that you didn't care, that you abandoned us. But it wasn't true, was it?" Daniel's throat was dry. He wanted to say, "I loved you more than life itself." He wanted to scream that her words that night, "Uncle Steve is way more fun than our loser dad," had buried him alive. But instead, he asked quietly, "Why are you here, Emma?" She flinched. "Because I need to tell you the truth. Because I need you to know I was wrong." The confession. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She tried to steady her voice, but it cracked under the weight of memory. "I was 16. I didn't understand anything. Mom kept feeding us lies about you. Said you didn't love us. Said you were too busy for us. Said Steve was the one who really cared. And I believed her because," she choked, covering her face, "because it was easier than seeing the truth. She pressured us, Dad. She twisted everything until we thought hating you was loyalty." Daniel sat frozen, each word cutting deep. He wanted to reject it, to guard himself, but the rawness in her voice shattered every defense. "I went along with it because I was scared of her," Emma whispered. "She made me feel like if I didn't pick her side, I'd lose her too. That night at the party, what I said to you, I've hated myself for it ever since." Her body shook with sobs, her fingers trembling against the coffee cup. "I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't mean it. I was a stupid kid trying to sound brave." Daniel's inner war. Daniel leaned back, staring at her, his chest a battlefield. Half of him wanted to reach across the table, to tell her she was forgiven, that nothing mattered but the fact that she was here. The other half, the scarred, hardened half, wanted to remind her of the nights he'd lain awake in cheap motel rooms, haunted by her words, her disdain, her absence. "Do you have any idea," he finally said, his voice low and steady, "what it did to me? Hearing my own daughter call me a loser. Watching you laugh at me with him." Emma winced as though struck. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself. But I need you to know I didn't understand. I thought I was being loyal. I thought—" Her voice broke again. "God, I was wrong." Silence stretched between them, thick with years of pain. Clara and Steve's ruin. Emma wiped her eyes, steadying herself enough to continue. "Steve and Mom are miserable. The house is falling apart. Steve drinks too much, barely works. They fight constantly. The kids, the younger ones, don't even talk to her anymore. And me?" She laughed bitterly. "I've been carrying this guilt like a stone on my back for 5 years." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had imagined this scene 1,000 times, Clara and Steve rotting in their own betrayal. To hear it confirmed brought no joy, only a grim validation. "They deserve each other," he muttered. Emma nodded weakly. "They do, but I don't. I was just a kid, Dad, and I've missed you every day since you left." The plea. Her hand reached across the table, tentative, shaking. "Please, I'm not asking you to come back, or to fix everything, or even to forgive Mom. I just—" Her voice cracked again. "I just want you to forgive me. I want to know my father again." Daniel stared at her hand, his heart twisting. This was the daughter who once cut him down with cruel words. And now, she was the same daughter begging for a second chance. His mind replayed the motel nights, the emptiness of starting over, the rage that had forged his new identity. Could he allow her back into his life without reopening those wounds? Bitterness whispered, "She chose them once. She'll hurt you again." But compassion, buried though it was, asked, "Or is this the chance to heal what you lost?" Daniel's response. Daniel inhaled deeply, eyes fixed on hers. "Emma, you don't know how many nights I wished you'd call me. That any of you would call me. I thought I was dead to you all." "You weren't," she said fiercely, gripping his hand now. "Not to me. Not really. I just didn't know how to reach you." His chest ached. He didn't pull his hand away, but he didn't close around hers either. "Your words hurt me more than your mother's ever could," he said, "because I believed I'd lost you. And I don't know if I can ever forget that." Emma's tears flowed again. "Then don't forget. Just let me try to make it right." Daniel's heart pounded in his ears, torn between the man he had become and the father he once was. He had rebuilt his empire on silence and distance, but here was his daughter, offering a bridge back to something human. And for the first time in years, he didn't know which side of himself to trust. Chapter 9. Confrontation with the Past. Word traveled faster than Daniel imagined it would. Perhaps it was inevitable. No man could vanish for 5 years, build a new life, and stay invisible forever. Emma had found him. Emma had cried in that cafe, confessed her regrets, and in her fragile attempt to repair what had been shattered, she had unknowingly opened a door Daniel had nailed shut. The knock came 3 days later. It was not timid. It was sharp, pounding, the kind of knock that carried entitlement, rage, and demand. Daniel stood in his quiet, modern home, glass walls framing the city he now owned a piece of, and felt the air shift. He knew before opening it. His past had found him. When he pulled the door wide, there she stood. Clara. Tom had not been kind. Her once meticulously polished beauty was fading beneath the strain of years without money or adoration. Lines carved her face, her hair dulled, her eyes still sharp but now hardened with bitterness. Behind her, leaning against the porch rail like a man trying to summon swagger he no longer possessed, was Steve. Bloated, unshaven, a washed-up shadow of the arrogant friend he once was. "Daniel," Clara hissed, her voice a cocktail of fury and desperation. "So it's true. You're alive." Daniel didn't flinch. "Alive and well. Can't say the same for you two." Her lips curled. "You bastard. You disappeared and left us to rot. Do you have any idea what you did to this family?" "Yes," Daniel said flatly. "I saved myself. The invasion." Clara shoved past him into the foyer, her heels clacking angrily on the polished wood floor. Steve followed, slower, as if too tired to keep up the act but unwilling to back out. Daniel closed the door behind them, not because he welcomed them, but because he wanted the confrontation contained. Clara spun on him, eyes blazing. "You owe us, Daniel. You can't just walk away from 21 years of marriage like it meant nothing." Daniel gave a cold, humorless laugh. "Oh, you? Clara, I gave you everything. A home, stability, loyalty, every hour of my life spent working to provide. And what did you do? You spat on it. You and him." He jerked his chin towards Steve, who shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Daniel's eyes. Clara sneered. "Oh, don't play the martyr. You work yourself into the ground, Daniel. You were never there. Steve was. That why the kids, don't you dare." Daniel cut her off, voice like steel. "Don't you dare use them as your excuse. You poisoned them against me, and you know it." Steve's collapse. Steve finally spoke, though his voice lacked the cocky edge it once carried. "Look, Danny boy, let's not get too dramatic. We all made mistakes, right? But 5 years you could have helped. You could have sent money. You left us with nothing." Daniel turned his gaze on him, icy and unwavering. "Nothing is exactly what you earned, Steve. You took my family, my home, my dignity, and you mocked me for it. And now you're here because without me, you have nothing. Tell me, how's that feel?" Steve's jaw tightened, his shoulders slumping. He didn't answer. Clara's desperation. Clara stepped closer, her perfume cloying but cheap compared to the luxury scents she once bathed in. "You think you're free of me? You think vanishing absolves you? No, Daniel. You're still legally tied to me. 21 years of marriage. You can't erase that. The law." Daniel cut in with a razor smile. "The law? I divorced you the night I left. My lawyer had the papers ready before you even realized I was gone. You signed, Clara. Maybe you were too drunk on Steve's promises to notice, but you signed. You got nothing then, and you'll get nothing now." Her face twisted, rage and disbelief warring with each other. "You heartless son of an O," Daniel said, stepping forward, his voice rising. "Heartless would have been staying. Heartless would have been continuing to let you bleed me dry while you laughed behind my back. Walking away was the only merciful thing I did." The duel of words. Clara's voice sharpened into venom. "You'll never survive without me, Danny. You were always weak. I carried the charm, the spark. You were just a paycheck. That's all you've ever been." Daniel smirked, unshaken. "Funny, this paycheck is standing in a multi-million-dollar home, while you're dressed like you crawled out of a bargain bin. Who's weak now, Clara?" Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, revealing the crack in her armor. Steve muttered, almost to himself, we should have. His words trailed off, swallowed by the thick silence. Daniel seized on it. "Say it, Steve. You should have never betrayed me. Never thought you could replace me. Because here's the truth, you never could. You were a parasite, and she was a fool. And together, you destroyed yourselves." Closure. Clara's face flushed red, her fists clenched. "You think this is over? You think you can humiliate me and walk away?" Daniel's voice dropped, calm and final. "It's already over, Clara. At the end of the day, you kissed him in front of me and laughed about it. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to end you. And the truth is, you ended yourself." Steve exhaled heavily, his bravado evaporated. He looked at Clara with something like resentment, then back at Daniel with hollow eyes. We just thought you thought wrong," Daniel snapped. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging like a guillotine. Clara's chest heaved, her eyes glossy not with sorrow, but with fury she couldn't unleash. Steve looked like a man already defeated, his shoulders sagging under years of bad choices. Daniel took a step back, pointing to the door. "Get out, both of you. Whatever fantasy you had about me saving you, erase it. You get nothing. Not now. Not ever." The final blow. Clara stood rooted, shaking, her mouth opening to unleash another volley, but Daniel's voice thundered over her. "I gave you everything, Clara. I gave you 21 years of my life, my trust, my loyalty. And you spat on it. You mocked me. You raised my children to hate me. And now," his voice dropped to a cold whisper, "now you get nothing." The words landed like a verdict. Clara's lip trembled, but she forced her chin high, pride clinging to her even as it bled out of her. Steve shuffled toward the door without another word. After a moment, Clara followed, heels clicking like gunshots in retreat. Daniel watched them go, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. He didn't shout after them, didn't gloat, didn't revel. He simply closed the door, and with that sound, the latch clicking into place, he knew the past no longer owned him. Chapter 10, Redemption and Final Lesson. The city was quiet that morning, sunlight spilling over the horizon, washing Daniel's office in a soft, golden glow. He sat at his desk, coffee untouched, eyes distant as if he were seeing through the glass into a life he had long left behind. 5 years. 5 years since he had vanished. 5 years since betrayal had burned through his family like wildfire. He had rebuilt himself, his fortune, and his pride, but the emotional debris of what had been lost still lingered, like shadows clinging stubbornly to corners. He heard the knock before it came, a soft, hesitant rap at the door. His heart rate ticked up, not from fear, not from rage, but from something older, deeper. He knew who it would be before the door even creaked open. Emma. She stepped in, hesitant, hands clasped in front of her, her eyes a mixture of awe and apology. Her auburn hair had grown longer, her posture straighter, and yet there was an unmistakable fragility in her expression. "Hi, Dad," she said softly, almost a whisper. Daniel closed his laptop and gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Sit," he said. His voice was calm, composed, but carried the authority of a man who had survived storms no one else could imagine. She perched on the edge of the chair, fidgeting slightly, clearly nervous. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again," she admitted, her voice trembling. "You're here now," Daniel said, letting the words hang. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "So what do you want, Emma?" Her gaze dropped. I want to try to rebuild. Not everything, I know that's impossible, but some part of us. Maybe just a relationship between us." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. He remembered her childhood, the rolling eyes, the cruel words, the blind allegiance to Clara and Steve. But he also remembered the tears she had shed in that cafe months ago, the honesty in her voice when she confessed how she had been manipulated, pressured to hate him. "Emma," he began slowly, "I can't pretend the past didn't happen. I can't erase the words, the actions, the way I was treated. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight." "I know," she said quickly, her voice desperate. "I know, Dad, but I'll earn it. I swear, I'll earn it if you let me." Daniel studied her, searching for the echoes of the girl he once knew and the young woman she had become. He saw it, the vulnerability beneath the guilt, the desire for redemption. "Then we'll start there," he said finally, his voice firm but gentle. "Trust must be earned, and you'll have to prove you're serious. No shortcuts, no lies." Emma's shoulders sagged in relief. She smiled, a small, tentative thing, and he felt the first real tug of warmth in years. The first steps. Over the next few months, their relationship grew slowly, like a fragile sapling pushing through hardened soil. Daniel would visit her apartment in the city on weekends, bringing groceries or helping her navigate bureaucratic tangles. Sometimes they just sat in silence, drinking coffee and listening to the hum of life around them, letting comfort grow naturally. Emma would call at odd hours, just to share a small victory, a promotion at work, a repaired friendship, a funny story about someone in her office. Daniel learned to listen again, to offer guidance without judgment, to allow himself to feel paternal warmth without expecting loyalty in return. It wasn't perfect. There were missteps, words spoken too sharply, emotional walls that creaked and threatened to collapse. But each conversation, each interaction, built a bridge stronger than any force of resentment. Reflection. One evening, Daniel found himself sitting alone on his balcony, city lights twinkling below like a sea of stars. He sipped whiskey slowly, letting the burn warm him as he reflected on the long journey from betrayal to survival, from anger to understanding. He remembered Clara's sneers, Steve's cocky arrogance, Emma's cruel words, and the public meltdown that had once shattered his world. He remembered the endless nights in motel rooms, the duffels full of money and documents, the careful planning to disappear without a trace. He remembered the thrill of reclaiming control, the rush of seeing their entitlement crumble when they realized he had cut them off completely. And now, he realized, none of that mattered as much as the quiet moments, the soft conversations with Emma, the slow rebuilding of trust, the feeling of a life unshackled by lies. Loyalty and love should never be taken for granted, he thought. Betrayal, once revealed, cannot be undone. But life can still be reclaimed. A visit. Emma came by that evening unexpectedly, bearing a small, homemade dessert. "Thought you might like some company," she said, placing it carefully on the table. Her eyes lingered on him, tentative, searching. Daniel glanced at the dessert, then at her. "I appreciate it," he said simply. "Come sit." They ate together in companionable silence, the easy familiarity of parent and child settling over them. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to savor the simplicity of life, not the wealth, not the revenge, not the vindication, but the presence of someone who mattered. "I missed this," Emma whispered after a while. "So did I," Daniel admitted quietly. Final lesson. Later that night, Daniel stood on the balcony again, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city. He inhaled deeply, letting the cool air fill his lungs, letting the silence and stillness of a night soothe the echoes of past turmoil. He thought of Clara, Steve, and the family that had once been his whole world. He thought of the years wasted on blind loyalty, of nights spent believing that providing everything was enough to guarantee love. He thought of betrayal, raw, public, agonizing, and the strength it had forced him to find in himself. And he realized, finally, what he had gained. Not wealth, not revenge, not fleeting satisfaction. Freedom, peace, the ability to live a life unshackled by the deceit and cruelty of others. The chance to choose carefully whom to trust, whom to let in, and to measure love not by obligation, but by mutual respect and sincerity. He whispered to the wind, almost to himself, almost as a prayer. "In the end, I lost a wife, a family, and 21 years. But what I gained was priceless. The freedom to never again live a lie." Daniel felt the weight lift from his chest. A chapter had closed, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with clarity. He was whole, finally, in the only way that mattered, on his own terms. He turned from the balcony, leaving the past behind, and walked into the quiet apartment, where Emma's soft laughter from the kitchen reminded him that redemption, though painstaking, was possible. And for the first time in decades, he allowed himself to hope.